Welcome to Business Brains and the Bottom Line podcast. My name is Paul Delegro, your host today, and my guest is a gentleman by the name of Phil Johnson from Ontario, Canada. Welcome to the show, Phil.
Thanks, Paul. It's a pleasure to be on your show.
Well, no, it's my pleasure, Phil. So in reading a little bit about you before the show, you run a company, you're a CEO of Master of Business Leadership, and you're an author of many books. You've got your own podcast. And you've got a great story because, when I hear leadership, I think, there's a million guys out there that do this stuff. But you actually have a very different spin on leadership. And you talk about emotional intelligence. And I've never even heard that term before. Well, I guess I've heard it, but not in the context that you use it. You've been doing this for a long time. And it makes a lot of sense what you're talking about. So, but before we get into the nuts and bolts of what you do, tell me a little bit about your path, how you got to this point, because you've been doing this a long time and you're a veteran guy, very successful at it. So how did you get to this point? What inspired you to do it?
Two things, really. First was my very good fortune of having been born with dyslexia. Okay. It caused me to do a lot of what I now refer to as the emotional labor, which gave me it's like an analogy. It's like a blind person that develops great hearing. Because my brain doesn't work the way most people's brains work, I had to compensate. And the emotional labor I had to do helped me to develop my emotional intelligence. And it's a big part of the MBL, the Master of Business Leadership program. The other thing that got me on this path was the death of my mother in December of 1967. She died of breast cancer. And in January of 1968, I decided I wanted to do this work. And I've been on this path for the last 54 years. And the last 21, I've been an executive coach.
Now you did the traditional sales jobs like all of us, right? You're in technology, like semiconductor sales for about 20 years, I think.
I spent 20 years in the semiconductor industry after studying electrical engineering, and I left that industry as a corporate executive to do what I do now.
Okay. All right. So let's jump right in. What is emotional intelligence?
That's a great question.
Because I read some of the, getting prepared for the show, I read up on it a little bit, and I'm not sure I understand it completely yet. So that's kind of why we have the show, right?
Sure. Very simply, it's the ability to feel the anxiety that change and innovation creates in us and move through it towards the vision of our desired results. That process and the emotional labor that requires develops our emotional intelligence, helps us to become more influential leaders, and raises our level of consciousness.
Very nice. So that leads me to the next question about leadership, right? There's all types of leadership styles out there, right? There's the heavy-handed guys, then there's the guys that treat you like their best friend, and it's all over the board, right? So how can this help you in being a leader?
So first of all, let me just say a couple of things about that. Leadership isn't a position; it's a choice. It's not a title. If you need a title to get people to follow you, you're not a leader.
Correct.
There's really only one litmus test for leadership, and that's inspired followers. And frankly, there are very few people that have the ability to inspire followers through their behavior. And so as a result, they rely on position-based power to try and control and manipulate others. And that's created the toxic environments we see today. Gallup estimates the current level of employee engagement worldwide at around 13%.
Oh, wow.
And so in the United States alone, low levels of employee engagement are costing the economy over $1 trillion a year. So there's a lot of room for improvement.
Yeah, I mean, Stan, it's such a low rate. I mean, if companies take this leadership seriously, they could develop people in a better way, and actually financially be in a better position as well. Am I kind of understanding this correctly?
Yeah, and I'll give you a great example of that.
Okay.
Of a company that's currently doing over $1 trillion a year in sales.
There's not
And
many of them, by the way. We could probably take a guess on that one, Phil.
the company, their primary focus, before I tell you who it is, the primary focus is in hiring and promotion is emotional intelligence. And when you walk into one of their stores, the energy you feel is an example of a more emotionally intelligent environment. And that company is Apple.
Right. I figured it was that one.
And so if you or your listeners have ever been in an Apple store, that energy you feel is an example of a more emotionally intelligent environment. And it's very different from the energy you feel in the stores surrounding them. So more and more companies are hiring and promoting based on emotional intelligence. Companies like Google, Southwest Airlines, JetBlue, Infosys, Whole Foods, FedEx, Costco, and others. And the reason for that is the accelerating rate of change. Where change is increasing at an exponential rate. And we've got a 500 million year old brain that doesn't like change.
Yep.
So there's significant both biological and sociological reasons that get in our way as far as change is concerned. And the development of emotional intelligence is critical in creating the ability to feel that anxiety and move through it, as opposed to allowing that anxiety to keep us trapped in our comfort zones.
So, what are some of the, obviously, we don't have enough time on the show to go through all your techniques, but what are some of the things that you teach to increase their emotional intelligence?
I show them how to stop giving away their energy. I show them how to increase their consciousness of the present moment, their agency, by giving them better habits to practice related to communications, listening, taking responsibility, being more strategic, making decisions. There's actually a myriad of ways. And we can develop new habits at any age. It's called brain plasticity or neurogenesis. And we need to do that if we want to get better results than we're currently getting. The habits that got us, we're only conscious about 3 to 5% of the time. The rest of the time, we're relying on our habits to create our behavior and results. So whatever results we're getting now is based on our current habits. If we want to get better results than we're getting now, we need to develop better habits. And that means that we need to do the emotional labor of leaving our comfort zone and, taking different actions. And we can do that at any age. It's how we develop the neural network pathways in our brain that become our habits.
So when you first engage with folks or companies and they say, hey, would like to hire you as a consultant to help our executive teams, our leadership team, I would venture to guess you get some pushback. How do you handle it?
Not really.
No, that's great. Well, my instincts told me that you're going to get some people that go, this is a crock. This is not real.
They typically don't call me. The people that I work with, well, I'd say about 80% of my new clients come from referrals of existing clients, and they said, whatever's in the Kool-Aid, I want some too. And so the one thing they have in common is an urgent desire for better results than they're currently getting.
So I think so with the state of leadership being so poor, I mean, what do you, if we don't make changes, what do you see the future being? With, again, things are changing.
Bleak.
So yeah,
We're it's estimated that in this century, we could experience the equivalent of about 20,000 years worth of change or 200 centuries worth of
right,
change. So we need to really try and wrap our head around that. It's never happened before.
right,
Um, Typically, from generation to generation, from the time somebody was born to the time they died, things were pretty much the same. Now change is increasing at an exponential rate. And we have significant both biological and sociological resistance to change. Let me give you an example. There's a part of our old lizard brain called the amygdala, and whenever we take an action that moves us outside of our comfort zone, it secretes a hormone into our bloodstream called cortisol to try
okay,
and get us to go back into our comfort zone. And when that happens, um, the executive center of our brain, our prefrontal cortex, shuts off, and we go into some type of fight, flight, or freeze mode. Psychologists call it an amygdala hijack. Some people run away, some people freeze like a deer in the headlights, and some people lash out.
right.
And we often say and do things we later regret. So when we're in the midst of one of these amygdala hijacks in a conflict situation, people sometimes die. And when in a business or personal situations, relationships die, we burn trust. So if you can think of, as an analogy, if you think of your amygdala as a very frightened 4-year-old child, the development of our emotional intelligence acts like a big brother or a big sister to quiet the amygdala response down and better enable us to feel the anxiety that change creates in us and move through it towards the vision of our desired results. And that's what I refer to as emotional labor. And by the way,
Interesting.
that's just there's another major biological resistance we have to change. And I may as well mention that it's our existing habits. Once we develop a habit or a neural network pathway in our brain, it's there forever. And so we can develop new habits, but the new habits, even though they can be better than the old habits, are always going to be weaker than the old habits. And there's going to be an
Right.
ongoing internal battle between our old habits and our new habits for control. So
And so
that's
how do
the
you
other
overcome that?
dedicated practice, ongoing practice um, that strengthens the new habit over time based on getting better results. The other major barrier to change we have is sociological, meaning the people around us don't want us to change. I mean, if we change and we start to get better results, maybe they're going to have to change, and that scares them.
Yeah.
And the best way to ensure they don't have to change is to make sure we fail so that they say, keep your head down and get back into the herd. And most of this is done unconsciously. You see, we don't know what we don't know.
Right.
And that needs to change.
So in some of the information that I kind of read about you talked about a few different things. You talked about the drama triangle between drama, chaos, and conflict, and the impact that has on communication and relationships and leadership. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. When we're in those kinds of toxic situations, we tend to raise our walls. We become more resistive, more judgmental, more attached to outcome. And that creates that downward spiral of drama, chaos, and conflict. And the reverse of that occurs as we learn to lower our walls through the development of our emotional intelligence. and we become more inspirational leaders. We're raising our level of consciousness and focusing on the present moment because the present moment is all that exists. The future will never exist, and the past no longer exists. So the only time we can actually do anything, the only time we share with everybody on the moment, the only time we can generate a result is in this moment. But unfortunately, our fear, our ego-based fear, tends to pull us out of the present moment. And
Right.
we're worried about some type of future moment or past moment. So we're not really present in this moment as much as we could be. So the more drama, chaos, and conflict, the less present we are, the less creative we are in this moment.
That makes sense, actually. And as you're talking here, I'm trying to think back to my career and the different leaders that I've had, and I think I may have said this to you before. If I look at some of the leaders that I've had, there's some that I would run through a wall for today, right?
Mhm.
And you touched on one thing. They were inspirational, educational. You really felt like they supported you, versus the other side of the coin is, you know, like I think I told you, I worked at EMC for a few years, and they were known to eat their young at one point, and
Yeah,
that was not their style there. I can tell you that. So
yeah.
you're starting to get me to think about the different leaderships. But I always felt like the guys that were educational, inspirational, motivational were the best type of leaders.
Yeah.
You
They're,
felt like
they're,
almost like a parent, right? Like you wanted to do well to help them as well.
well, I would say not so much a parent, but they lead by example. And in those kind of environments, there's a chemical in our brain that gets released called oxytocin,
Okay.
and that gives us a feeling of camaraderie, of teamwork, of trust, and raises our level of engagement. We're sharing. We're in a shared journey to achieve a desired result. So there's a high level of trust in those environments. And actually, there's something called the trust economy because the rate of change is increasing so rapidly. We can't keep up. Um, as we just can't research everything the way we might have in the past. So we're being forced to rely more and more on our network of trusted advisors, people we trust. And actually, that economy is estimated at over $10 trillion a year. It's growing much faster than the traditional economy. So our network of trusted advisors is the most valuable asset we have as individuals or as an organization. And the way we encourage people to trust us is we demonstrate our trustability by lowering our walls, as you say, by becoming less resistive, less judgmental, and less attached to outcome.
Yeah, I mean, it makes so much sense. Now that you got me thinking about this, it really does make sense. But so let me ask you a question on the flip side of this. Why do leaders feel like they have to rule with an iron fist? Because that never works. It's never worked. It never will work. But why do people like that continue to lead that way? Kind of a pet peeve of mine, to be honest with you.
Let me let me answer that by changing it around a little bit.
Okay.
Um, if the model we live in, let's just um, if the model we live in views power as external, as something we have to go and get, we're not enough. Um, doesn't it stand to reason that the people that are leading in that environment are the best at controlling and
Yeah.
manipulating others in the pursuit of external power? That's not leadership,
Right.
but unfortunately, that's the way we've been behaving for a very, very long time. And all you have to do is take a look around at the world for examples of what that's created. We killed more people in the 20th century than in all of recorded human history. and we're not doing too great this century. So we're actually at a tipping point as a species on the planet. We have to change our trajectory dramatically to be able to deal with the challenges we're going to be facing, not only now, but even more so going forward. And that means we need to be developing our emotional intelligence.
Yeah, I would agree with that, because if you look at, population is increasing geometrically, right? We've got how many, almost 8 billion people in the world today. And that projection keeps going up with medical technology, people living longer, things that babies used to die from, that's not happening anymore. And that concerns me. And you touched on something earlier that's kind of resonating with me right now, is that our brains are millions of years old, but technology has, the last 150 years has changed dramatically. And you said it's even getting faster now. So, guys like me that were born, I don't know how many years ago, the world is a completely different world just within my lifetime. So to understand everything that's going on and to be able to change is got to be difficult, I would think, right?
It's the biggest challenge we face.
Yeah.
It's the Mark Twain once said, Mark Twain once commented, if the only way mankind can learn is through experience, I see no hope for mankind. So if the only way we can learn is by putting our hand on the stove, that assumes that we're going to be around to learn from that experience.
Right.
And we're dealing with things like CRISPR-Cas9, gene editing technology, and AI, and climate change, and other pandemics that you really don't get a do-over on.
Yeah.
So we really need to be developing the emotional intelligence, the intuition to make better choices without putting our hand on the stove.
Yeah. Yeah. And, like you had said earlier, with the way the world is today, with there's so much conflict in the world today, I don't see it getting better anytime soon. I'm not a world leader, but just if you have your eyes open,
it will actually get worse.
Yeah.
It will get a lot worse. And that's based on what I've already said about the biological and sociological resistance we have to change. So we have this tsunami of change coming at us that we can't get out of the way of, that we can't hide from, that we can't pretend isn't happening. And we really suck at change. We're really terrible at change. So we're going to have a point where the anxiety we feel is going to either force us to move out of our comfort zone in the development of our emotional intelligence, or it's going to force us deeper into our comfort zone, which is going to create even more drama, chaos, and conflict.
And that's not a good thing if we head that direction, that's for sure.
No, it's not.
Yeah. So what do you think we can do as a people? Now, we started out talking about leadership, right? In the business world, right? But how can we change that in the world? That's a big question, right? But how can we change that where we kind of educate people at a younger age to understand what we're talking about today and train them to be better at it?
Yeah. We need to be developing our emotional intelligence at every age. Our educational system has failed us, and our employment system has failed us because it's focused primarily on our ability to do intellectual labor, on IQ, right, and has done little to develop our emotional intelligence. Excuse me. Here's a quick an analogy. Would you rather have $10,000 a day for 31 days, or a penny doubles every day for 31 days? So $10,000 a day at the end of 31 days is $310,000. A penny doubling every day at the end of 31 days is $10.7 million. At the end of 40 days, it's over 5 billion, or at the end of 50 days, it's over 5 trillion. So that's IQ versus EQ, intellectual ability versus emotional intelligence. And so, whereas our ability to do intellectual labor is largely genetic, not everybody can have 160 IQ.
Right.
If you have a high Q, so did your parents, and so did their parents. But anybody can develop their emotional intelligence. And when you combine emotional intelligence with intellectual intelligence, it creates exponential results, both in life and in career.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I would tend to agree with that, Phil. But switching directions here. How's business for you right now? How busy are you? Because I got to believe that with your referral network you've talked about, you've been doing this a long time. I would think they're lining up for you. That's a part one. Part two is, do you have a team that you have that are assistants to you that can teach the same thing so you can kind of scale?
My team is the people I'm coaching. I'm coaching them to inspire emotional intelligence and leadership within their organizations, and with their customers. I do have support, but I do all of this coaching, teaching, and mentoring myself.
Wow.
And business is accelerating.
Yeah, I would think it would be. I mean, 'cause I know every organization wants to be more efficient. I mean, they say that, right? And I think that I really do believe they think that. I just don't think they know how to go about doing it.
Yeah, they haven't. That's a great comment. They haven't seen it modeled enough. So no question, they want better results than they're currently getting, but they don't know how to do it. They don't know how to go about it. And they don't realize how difficult it is, or how much of an investment they need to make in time and resources to change the trajectory of their organization. Most organizations are focused on short-term results. It's the
Yeah.
have you ever heard of that Stanford study in the early 70s? The one marshmallow now, two marshmallow later experiment, where they offer a child, so you can have one marshmallow now, or you can have two marshmallows in 30 minutes. And then they did a longitudinal study to see how the kids made out later in life, based on the ones that had the marshmallow immediately and the ones that were willing to delay gratification. So we're a one marshmallow culture.
Yeah.
My wife and I were kidding about this last night. He said, I want one marshmallow now, and then I want the other one now as well.
Yeah.
So
that's true.
So we really look for those short-term dopamine hits. We want to feel good immediately. So we're ticking things off our to-do list, and we're not really willing to forego that reward. And strategic initiatives take time to develop.
Yeah.
So you have to be willing to forego short-term success for long-term success.
And you got me thinking about this now too. A lot of the big corporations, they live, week to week, month to month, quarter to quarter, and it's all about the number today.
Yep.
And I have had some leaders that I've worked with and for that have had more long range turns. Like, hey, long as we're doing all the right things, those orders didn't come in now, but they'll come in next quarter, and we're going to need orders then. And they have a long range plan versus we need that number today or someone's going to die. Yeah. And that's kind of the mentality. But it's everywhere though, Phil.
Well, take a look out your window. Is this the kind of society we want going forward?
Yeah. I don't
So
think so.
we need to change our trajectory. And that comes down to the development. The development of our emotional intelligence is a critical piece of our evolution that's missing. And because of the accelerating rate of global change, we need it now more than ever.
Yeah.
So it's not, emotional intelligence isn't a solution to the challenges we face. It is the only solution to the challenges we face.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you, Phil. I'm not, like I said, as I'm sitting here listening to you, I mean, you're making all the sense in the world. But I guess the big question is, what's the first step a company can make? In it,
Yeah.
in addition to calling you, by the way, but there's only one of you, right? I mean, there's millions of companies out there. What can companies do in your mind to change the course?
You can't have organizational change without individual change. So, what organizations need to do, there's a methodology for individual change and there's a separate methodology for organizational change, but it begins with individual change.
Right.
So organizations need to be looking for those people that are willing to challenge themselves to grow, to do the emotional labor necessary to develop their emotional intelligence. And once 20 to 25% of the people in the group or in the team are demonstrating emotional intelligent behavior, you reach a tipping point.
Okay.
Where the rest of the group tends to move in that direction because they see the changes in behavior and they see the results that they're generating. So the organization can heal itself. And this is the way to do it.
And in your experience, how long does that take, roughly?
There's no there's no one size fits all. It depends on the level of consciousness, the level of emotional intelligence, the level of inspirational leadership that already exists within the organization. It depends on the size of the organization. I've been working with some organizations for over 12 years. The ROI keeps getting greater and greater and greater as they develop these abilities. So there really isn't a one-word answer.
Sure. No, makes sense. I'm just surprised I haven't heard more about emotional intelligence and developing that skill. Just why is it not more mainstream, do you think?
People don't know what it is. See, let me
I
back
didn't.
up.
I want to be honest with you.
Yeah,
I had to
you're
read
you're
up on this.
you're not alone.
Yeah.
You're not alone. And what's worse is emotional intelligence, the development of emotional intelligence is an experiential process. It's not an intellectual process, meaning that you can't develop emotional intelligence by reading a book or having a conversation like this or watching a video. Those are intellectual processes.
Right.
Emotional intelligence is an experiential process where you can only connect the dots after you've taken the leap of faith. So as it's a very challenging process to take that leap of faith and do the emotional labor that it's like Navy SEAL training for your emotions. So reading about it, talking about it, won't do anything to develop it. So it's very easy to explain the process and the resistance we have to the development of emotional intelligence. That's easy. That's an intellectual understanding.
Right.
It's very difficult to develop emotional intelligence because that requires us to leave our comfort zone and move through the fear and the anxiety
Of
that
change.
will trigger in us.
Yeah.
So, but that's what all truly inspirational, emotionally intelligent leaders have in common is a willingness or a necessity to do the emotional labor required.
Yeah.
And frankly, it's if I hadn't had the good fortune of being born with dyslexia, I probably wouldn't have been willing to do the emotional labor required either, and I wouldn't be doing this today.
Yeah, it's amazing that you well, I wouldn't say figured it out, but you started this path when you were just a kid. But like you said, somewhat by necessity, being a dyslectic.
Yeah.
And you've mastered it. But it sounds like you're having a lot of fun with it, right? I mean, just on a personal note, I mean, this is something you love, right?
I absolutely love helping people to become more conscious of what's going on in them and around them. I love it. It's a challenging process, but it's I can't think of a better reason to get up in the morning.
Yeah, I'm assuming it's going to be very rewarding when you see the results, right?
Yep.
Yeah, very nice. Well, Phil, I think this has been a very eye-opening conversation for me personally. I appreciate you coming on the show. But any last words for the listeners or out there that if they want to get in touch with you or how to start this journey?
The best advice I could give everybody is to invest in the development of their emotional intelligence. It's the single biggest thing they can do to ensure that the rest of their life will be the best of their life. And if they'd like to get in touch with me to have a conversation, they can reach me through my LinkedIn profile, and my calendar is on there. And I'd love to jump on a Zoom call and have a chat.
Awesome. Well, Phil, thanks again for being on the show. I think this is very informative, and we'll be in touch. Hope you never know. Maybe we may have you on again, because I think we could have gone. I had my notes for the show, and I got like a quarter of the way through. So there's so much more we could have talked about. But this is very intriguing to me. I enjoyed it, and again, thanks again.
Happy to be on your show, Paul, and thanks for the work you're doing.
Yeah, we're trying to get the word out there. Well, that's it. That's it for Business Brains, the bottom line. Again, this is Paul Delegro, your host, signing off. Until next time.